always do this. You never listen to me.
That's not Tata. That's not true. I'm trying to understand, but you're not making any sense.
Who is this?
How are you feeling today?
What would you do if you were trapped in a loveless marriage with a cruel husband? This chilling true story reveals a woman's desperate escape plan, leaving you questioning the limits of freedom. The coffin was supposed to be empty when they buried it, but Grace was inside, holding her breath in the darkness, feeling the weight of dirt falling on the wooden box above her head. Each shovel of earth sounded like thunder in her ears. Her heart beat so fast she was sure everyone at the funeral could hear it. Thump, thump, thump. She pressed her hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. The air was getting thin. She had only minutes before she would run out of oxygen. But she had to wait. She had to wait until everyone left the cemetery. Until her husband Michael walked away, thinking she was finally gone forever. Only then could she dig her way out and start her new life. But right now, lying in that coffin 6 feet underground, Grace wondered if her plan would work. Or if she would actually die trying to escape the man who had made her life a living hell. 3 months earlier, Grace had been a different woman. She lived in a beautiful house in Victoria Island, Lagos, with her husband Michael Thompson. To everyone who knew them, they looked like the perfect couple. Michael was a successful businessman who owned 3 restaurants in the city. Grace was a nurse at Lagos University Hospital. They had been married for 5 years. But nobody knew the truth about what happened behind closed doors. Started small. Michael would get angry when Grace came home late from work. He would shout at her, calling her names. "You're useless, Grace. You can't do anything right," he would say. At first, Grace thought it was just stress from work. She tried to be a better wife, but the shouting turned into something worse. The first time Michael hit her, Grace was making dinner. She had burned the rice by accident. Michael came into the kitchen and saw the pot smoking. "What is this?" he yelled. "Can't you even cook rice properly?"
I'm sorry, Michael.
"I was helping our neighbor with her sick baby, and I forgot." Slap. The sound of his hand hitting her face echoed through the kitchen. Grace touched her cheek, shocked. It was hot and stinging. "Don't you ever embarrass me like this again," Michael said, his voice cold. "What if I had brought my business partners home? What would they think of me with a wife who can't even cook?" Grace stared at him, tears filling her eyes. This was not the man she married. This was someone else wearing Michael's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You should be," Michael said. Then he walked out of the kitchen like nothing had happened. That night, Grace looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. There was a red mark on her cheek. She touched it gently and winced. She told herself it was just one time. Michael was stressed. It wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again, and again, and again. Over the next few months, Michael's anger grew worse. He would hit Grace for small things. If she talked too long on the phone with her sister, if she forgot to buy his favorite bread, if she looked at other men when they went out together. Grace started wearing long sleeves to cover the bruises on her arms. She put makeup on her face to hide the marks. When her friends asked why she looked tired, she said she was working too many shifts at the hospital. The worst part was not the hitting. It was the way Michael would act sweet afterward. He would buy her flowers and say sorry. He would promise it would never happen again. And Grace wanted to believe him so badly that she did believe him over and over. "I love you, Grace," he would say, holding her close after hurting her. "You know I love you, right? I only get angry because I care about you. I want you to be perfect because you deserve to be perfect." Grace would nod and forgive him. But deep inside, a small voice was getting louder. It was telling her that this was not love. This was not what marriage should be. The voice got louder the day she met Sarah. Sarah was a new patient at the hospital. She came to the emergency room with a broken arm. But when Grace was cleaning her wounds, she saw other marks on Sarah's body. Old bruises, scars. "How did this happen?" Grace asked gently. Sarah looked away. "I fell down the stairs." Grace had heard that story many times before. She knew it wasn't true. It's okay, Grace said. You can tell me the truth. I won't judge you. Sarah started crying. It was my boyfriend. He gets angry when I don't do things the way he wants. Last night, I came home 5 minutes late from work, and he pushed me down the stairs. Grace felt like she was looking in a mirror. Sarah's story was her story. You don't have to stay with him, Grace said. There are places you can go. People who can help you. I can't leave, Sarah said. He said he would find me anywhere I go. He said he would kill me if I tried to leave him. Those words hit Grace like a punch in the stomach, because Michael had said the same thing to her just last week. Grace had been thinking about visiting her sister in Abuja for a few days. When she mentioned it to Michael, his face turned dark. You're not going anywhere, he said. Your place is here with me. But it's just my sister. I haven't seen her in months. Michael grabbed her arm so tight it hurt. Listen to me, Grace. If you ever try to leave me, I will find you. I don't care where you go. I will find you, and I will make you sorry you were ever born. Do you understand me? Grace nodded, scared. Say it, Michael demanded. I understand, Grace whispered. That night, Grace lay in bed next to Michael, listening to him snore. She thought about Sarah's words. She thought about her own life. She realized that she was trapped just like Sarah was trapped. But unlike Sarah, Grace was not going to give up. She was going to find a way out. The next morning, Grace started planning. But she was careful, very careful. She knew that if Michael found out what she was thinking, he would hurt her worse than ever before. She started by saving money. Every week, she would take a small amount from her salary and hide it in a place Michael would never look, inside an old medical textbook on her bookshelf. She also started keeping a bag hidden at the hospital with some clothes and important documents. But even with her planning, Grace knew it wouldn't be enough. Michael was smart. He watched her all the time. He checked her phone. He asked her co-workers about her schedule. If she just disappeared one day, he would find her. She needed a plan that would make him stop looking for her forever. And then, one rainy evening in October, Grace was watching the news when she saw a story that gave her a terrible, dangerous idea. The news reporter was talking about a woman who had died in a car accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge. The woman's body had fallen into the lagoon and was never found. The family held a funeral with an empty coffin, the reporter said. They said it gave them closure to say goodbye, even without the body. Grace stared at the television screen. An empty coffin. A funeral without a body. What if the coffin wasn't empty? What if someone was inside it, alive, waiting to escape? The idea was crazy. It was dangerous. Could kill her. But it might be the only way to make Michael believe she was really gone. Grace turned off the television and went to her room. She pulled out a notebook and started writing. She wrote down every detail she would need to make her plan work. She would need help from someone she trusted. She would need to time everything perfectly. And she would need to be braver than she had ever been in her life. 3 weeks later, Grace was ready to put her plan into action. It started with the accident. Grace had asked her friend Jennifer, who worked as a paramedic, to help her. Jennifer was the only person who knew about Michael's abuse. Grace had finally told her the truth after Jennifer noticed the bruises on her arms. I want to help you leave him, Jennifer had said, but running away won't work. He'll find you. That's when Grace told her the plan. You want to fake your own death? Jennifer stared at her like she was crazy. Grace, that's impossible. And dangerous. It's the only way, Grace said. If Michael thinks I'm dead, he'll stop looking for me. I can start a new life somewhere far away. Jennifer shook her head. What if something goes wrong? What if you actually die? Then at least I'll die free, Grace said. Took days, but finally Jennifer agreed to help. She knew Grace was right. Running away wouldn't work. Michael would never stop hunting for her. The plan was simple but dangerous. Grace would stage a car accident near the lagoon at night. Jennifer would be the paramedic who responded to the emergency call. They would make it look like Grace had drowned, but Jennifer would secretly give Grace a drug that would slow down her heart and make her appear dead. The hardest part would be surviving the funeral. On the night of the fake accident, Grace drove her car to a quiet spot near the third mainland bridge. She had chosen this location because it was the same place where the woman in the news story had really died. It would make the story more believable. Grace called 911 and reported the accident using a voice changer app on her phone. Then she waited for Jennifer to arrive. When the ambulance came, Jennifer was driving. She had convinced her partner to let her handle this call alone, saying it was probably just another false alarm. Jennifer gave Grace the injection that would make her heart beat very slowly. "This will last about 6 hours," she whispered. "After that, your body will return to normal. But you have to be out of the coffin by then or—" "I know," Grace said. "I'll be ready." Jennifer called the police and reported that they had found Grace's car by the bridge, but no body. She said it looked like Grace had fallen into the lagoon. When Michael got the call, he rushed to the hospital. Grace was lying on a bed in the morgue, looking pale and still. The drug Jennifer had given her made her skin cold and her breathing almost impossible to detect. "Is she really gone?" Michael asked the doctor. "I'm sorry for your loss," the doctor said. "The water damage was extensive, but we were able to recover her body downstream." Michael stared at Grace's face. For a moment, Grace was terrified that he would notice something wrong. But then she saw something in his eyes that shocked her. Relief. Michael was relieved that she was dead. "When can we have the funeral?" he asked. Grace's heart broke, even as she lay there pretending to be dead. The man she had married, the man she had loved, was happy that she was gone. But it also made her more determined than ever to escape. The funeral was planned for 3 days later. That would give Grace just enough time for the drug to wear off and for her to regain her strength. Jennifer had prepared everything. She had drilled small holes in the coffin that would be covered by flowers, so Grace could breathe. She had also weakened the wooden lid so Grace could break out from the inside. The plan was for Grace to wait until everyone left the cemetery, then break out of the coffin and dig her way to the surface. Jennifer would be waiting nearby with a car to take her away from Lagos forever. But as Grace lay in the coffin during the funeral service, listening to Michael give a speech about what a wonderful wife she had been, she realized how dangerous her plan really was. The coffin was small and dark. The air was thick and hot. She could hear Michael's voice above her, but it sounded far away. "Grace was the light of my life," Michael was saying. "I don't know how I'll live without her." "Liar," Grace thought. "You're probably planning to celebrate as soon as everyone goes home." Then she heard the sound she had been dreading. Thump. The first shovel of dirt hit the coffin. Thump, thump. More dirt. The sound was getting louder and heavier. Grace realized that the cemetery workers were burying her faster than she had expected. In her plan, she thought they would take their time. But they were working quickly, eager to finish the job and go home. Thump, thump, thump. The weight of the dirt was pressing down on the coffin. Grace felt the wooden box starting to bend under the pressure. She tried to stay calm, but panic was rising in her chest. What if the coffin broke before she could get out? What if she was crushed by the dirt? And then she heard something that made her blood freeze. Michael's voice, much closer now. He was standing right above her grave. "Make sure you pack that dirt down tight," he was telling the workers. "I want to make sure nothing gets out of there." Grace's eyes went wide in the darkness. Did Michael know she was alive? Was this all a trap? Her heart was beating so fast now that she was sure everyone above could hear it. The air in the coffin was getting thinner. She had to get out soon or she really would die. But Michael was still up there, watching, waiting. Grace closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing. She had come too far to give up now. She had to trust her plan. She had to wait until Michael left. But what if he never left? What if he suspected something and planned to stay at her grave all night? As more dirt fell on her coffin, Grace realized that her plan might have one fatal flaw. She might actually die trying to escape the man who had already killed her spirit. The question was, would anyone find her body before it was too late? Grace heard Michael's footsteps walking around her grave, back and forth, like a guard watching a prison. The cemetery workers had finished burying her 20 minutes ago. Everyone else had gone home. But Michael was still there, standing in the darkness above her. Grace's lungs were burning. The air in the coffin was almost gone. She pressed her face against one of the tiny holes Jennifer had drilled in the wood, trying to suck in fresh air through the dirt. But it wasn't enough. She was going to die for real if she didn't get out soon. Why won't he leave? Grace thought desperately. Then she heard Michael's voice, and her blood turned to ice. I know you're down there, Grace. Grace's heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, Michael knew she was alive. Did you really think you could fool me? Michael laughed, and the sound was more terrifying than anything Grace had ever heard. I've been watching you for weeks. I saw you talking to that paramedic friend of yours. I saw you hiding money. I saw you making plans. Grace wanted to scream, but she couldn't make a sound. If Michael knew she was alive, then this wasn't an escape plan anymore. This was a trap. You think you're so smart, Michael continued. But you forgot one thing, my dear wife. I know you better than you know yourself. Grace heard Michael sit down on the ground above her grave. He was making himself comfortable. He was planning to stay. Here's what's going to happen, Michael said, his voice calm and cold. You're going to stay down there until you really do die. And when they find your body in a few days, everyone will think you died in that car accident just like you planned. Except you really will be dead this time. Tears ran down Grace's face in the darkness. Her plan had failed. She was going to die in this coffin, and no one would ever know the truth about what Michael had done. But then Grace heard something that gave her hope. Another voice. A woman's voice. Michael? What are you doing here so late? Grace recognized the voice. It was Mrs. Adebayo, the old woman who cleaned the cemetery. She lived in a small house near the entrance and often worked at night when it was cooler. Oh, hello, Mrs. Adebayo, Michael said, and Grace could hear him trying to sound normal. I was just saying goodbye to my wife. It's hard to leave her here alone. I understand, Mrs. Adebayo said kindly, but you should go home and rest. Your wife wouldn't want you to make yourself sick with grief. You're right, Michael said. Grace could hear the fake sadness in his voice. I'll go home now. Grace listened as Michael's footsteps walked away. She waited until she couldn't hear him anymore. Then she waited 5 more minutes to be sure. Finally, Grace began to fight for her life. She pushed against the coffin lid with all her strength. Jennifer had weakened the wood, but it was still hard to break. Grace pushed and pushed until her arms ached. Crack. The wood started to split. Grace pushed harder. Crack. The coffin lid broke open. Dirt poured down on Grace's face, but she didn't care. She could breathe again. Grace dug upward with her hands, pushing dirt behind her. It was slow, hard work. Her fingernails broke and her hands started bleeding, but she kept digging. It felt like hours, but finally Grace's hand broke through to the surface. She felt cool night air on her fingers. Grace dug faster now, making the hole bigger. Finally, she was able to pull herself out of the grave. She lay on the ground next to her own grave, breathing heavily. She had done it. She was alive. But Grace knew she wasn't safe yet. Michael might come back. She had to find Jennifer and get away from Lagos as quickly as possible. Grace stood up and brushed dirt off her funeral dress. Then she heard footsteps behind her. My. Look what crawled out of the ground. Grace spun around. Michael was standing there, smiling. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a devil. I knew you would try to dig your way out, Michael said. So I hid behind that big tree over there and waited. You're so predictable, Grace. Grace tried to run, but Michael was faster. He grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. Let me go, Grace screamed. No one can hear you, Michael said. Mrs. Adebayo went home an hour ago. It's just you and me now. Michael dragged Grace toward the old maintenance shed at the back of the cemetery. Grace tried to fight, but Michael was much stronger than her. He pushed her inside the shed and locked the door. Now we're going to have a little talk, Michael said, turning on a flashlight. The light made scary shadows on the walls. Grace looked around the shed. It was full of old tools and equipment. In the corner, she saw something that made her stomach turn. A shovel covered in fresh dirt. Michael had been planning this for a long time. "You want to know the truth, Grace?" Michael said, sitting down on an old wooden box. "I never loved you, not even on our wedding day." Grace stared at him. "What?" "I married you because my business partners thought I needed a wife to look respectable. You were pretty and smart, and you made me look good. But I never loved you." Grace felt like she had been punched in the chest. "Then why didn't you just divorce me?" Michael laughed. "Divorce is expensive and messy. It would hurt my reputation. But if my wife died in a tragic accident, well, that would make people feel sorry for me. Good for business." "You're sick," Grace whispered. "Maybe," Michael said, "but I'm also rich and smart. Smart enough to know that you were planning to leave me." Michael stood up and walked closer to Grace. She backed against the wall. "You see, I hired someone to follow you 3 weeks ago," Michael said. "I know about the money you hid. I know about the bag at the hospital. I know about your friend Jennifer and your stupid plan to fake your death." Grace's heart sank. If Michael knew about Jennifer, then Jennifer might be in danger too. "What did you do to Jennifer?" Grace asked. Michael smiled that devil SM. "The police think she was crying about your death and lost control of the car."
No.
Grace screamed. "You monster! Jennifer was just trying to help me." "Jennifer should have minded her own business," Michael said coldly. Grace started crying. Jennifer was dead because of her. Her friend had died trying to help her escape, and now Grace was going to die too. "Please, Michael," Grace begged. "I'll do anything you want. I'll be a perfect wife. I'll never try to leave again. Just please don't kill me." "It's too late for that," Michael said. "You're already dead. Remember? You died in a car accident 3 days ago. We even had a funeral." Michael picked up the dirty shovel from the corner. "Now I'm going to finish what I started," he said. "I'm going to bury you for real this time, and when they find your body in a few months, everyone will think you tried to dig yourself out of your grave but died anyway. People will say you must have been buried alive by accident. Very tragic." Grace looked around the shed desperately. She needed a weapon. She needed something to defend herself with. Then she saw it. On a shelf near the door, there was an old hammer. Michael was walking toward her with the shovel, but he wasn't watching her hands carefully. Grace waited until he was close enough. Then she grabbed the hammer and swung it at his head. Thunk! The hammer hit Michael in the temple. He stumbled backward, dropping the shovel. "You little," Michael started to say, but Grace hit him again. This time Michael fell down. Blood was running from a cut on his head. Grace didn't wait to see if he was okay. She ran to the door and tried to open it. But Michael had locked it from the inside, and the key was in his pocket. Grace looked back. Michael was trying to get up. His eyes were angry and full of hate. "You can't escape me, Grace," he said, wiping blood from his face. "I'll always find you, no matter where you go." Grace knew he was right. Even if she got out of this shed, Michael would never stop hunting her. He would find her anywhere she tried to hide. Unless Grace looked at the hammer in her hand. Then she looked at Michael. She had 2 choices. She could try to run and spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, always afraid. Or she could end this tonight forever. Grace had never killed anyone before. She was a nurse. She was supposed to save lives, not take them. But Michael wasn't really alive anymore. The man she had married was gone. The thing crawling toward her now was a monster wearing her husband's face.
"I'm sorry, Michael," Grace whispered.
"But you're right about one thing. This ends tonight." Michael's eyes went wide as he realized what Grace was going to do. Grace, wait! But Grace was done waiting. She was done being afraid. She was done being a victim. Grace raised the hammer above her head. "This is for Jennifer," she said.
"Grafe, no."
Thunk! The sound echoed through the shed. Then everything was quiet. Grace stood over Michael's body, breathing hard. The hammer fell from her shaking hands. It was over. Michael was dead. She was free. But as Grace looked down at what she had done, she realized that killing Michael had changed her forever. She wasn't the same person who had climbed into that coffin a few hours ago. She was someone new, someone harder, someone who could do whatever it took to survive. Grace searched Michael's pockets and found the key to the shed. She also found his wallet and car keys. As she was about to leave, Grace heard something that made her freeze. Sirens. Police sirens getting closer. Someone had called the police. Maybe Mrs. Adebayo had heard the screaming. Maybe someone had seen the light in the shed. Grace looked at Michael's body. If the police found her here, they would arrest her for murder. It wouldn't matter that Michael had been trying to kill her. She was supposed to be dead. How could she explain being alive without revealing her whole plan? Grace made a quick decision. She dragged Michael's body to the corner of the shed and covered it with an old tarp. Then she turned off the flashlight and hid behind some boxes. The police sirens were very close now. Grace could see red and blue lights flashing through the small window of the shed. Someone knocked on the shed door. "Police! Is anyone in there?" Grace held her breath and didn't move. The knocking came again, louder this time. "We're coming in." Grace heard keys jingling. The police were going to break down the door. She had to think fast. If they found her here, everything would be ruined. But if they found Michael's body, they would search the whole cemetery. Grace looked around the shed one more time. In the far corner, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. A small door. It looked like it led to an underground tunnel. Grace crawled toward the door as quietly as she could. Behind her, she could hear the police trying to break down the main door. Grace opened the small door and crawled inside just as the police broke into the shed. "Clear!" she heard one of them shout. Grace found herself in a narrow tunnel that seemed to run under the cemetery. It was dark and smelled like dirt and old water. But it was better than being caught by the police. Grace crawled through the tunnel, not knowing where it led. Behind her, she could hear the police searching the shed. Soon they would find Michael's body. But by then, Grace would be long gone. As she crawled through the darkness, Grace thought about everything that had happened. She had faked her own death. She had been buried alive. She had killed her husband. And somehow she was still alive. But Grace knew her troubles were far from over. When the police found Michael's body, they would start asking questions. They would wonder what he was doing at the cemetery so late at night. They would investigate his death. And eventually, they might figure out that Grace wasn't really dead. Grace reached the end of the tunnel. It opened up into a storm drain near the main road. She climbed out and found herself about half a mile from the cemetery. In the distance, she could see police cars and ambulances surrounding the cemetery. Red and blue lights lit up the night sky. Grace walked to the main road and waited for a taxi. When one stopped, she told the driver to take her to the bus station. "You look terrible, sister," the taxi driver said, looking at Grace's dirty funeral dress in his mirror. "What happened to you?" "I fell into a ditch," Grace lied. "I'm fine." At the bus station, Grace bought a ticket to Abuja. She would go to her sister's house and figure out what to do next. As the bus pulled away from Lagos, Grace looked out the window at the city lights getting smaller behind her. She had escaped Michael. She was free. But Grace knew that her real problems were just beginning. Because somewhere back in that cemetery, the police had found a dead body. And soon they would start looking for answers. Answers that could lead them straight to a woman who was supposed to be dead. Grace closed her eyes and tried to sleep as the bus drove through the night. But every time she started to drift off, she saw Michael's face in her dreams. Not the face of the monster who had tried to kill her, but the face of the man she had married 5 years ago. The man who had once told her he loved her. The man she had killed with her own hands. Grace wondered if she would ever be able to forget what she had done. Or if Michael's ghost would haunt her for the rest of her life. The bus drove on through the darkness, carrying Grace toward an uncertain future. But at least she was alive to face it. 3 months later, Grace was living a completely different life. Her name was now Ruth Johnson. She had long braids instead of her old short hair. She wore glasses even though her eyes were perfect. She worked as a cleaner in a small hospital in Kaduna, far from Lagos. Nobody in Kaduna knew that Ruth Johnson used to be Grace Thompson. Nobody knew that Grace Thompson was supposed to be dead. Grace had been living quietly, trying to forget everything that happened that night in the cemetery. She rented a tiny room behind the hospital and sent money to her sister in Abuja every month. But she never visited. She was too afraid that someone might recognize her. But Grace should have known that the past never stays buried. It was a Tuesday morning when Grace saw the newspaper headline that changed everything. Mystery deepens in cemetery murder case. Grace's hands shook as she read the article. Police are still searching for clues in the murder of businessman Michael Thompson, whose body was found 3 months ago in Ikoyi Cemetery. Thompson was discovered in a maintenance shed with fatal head injuries. What makes this case unusual is that Thompson was found at his wife's grave. Grace Thompson died in a car accident 3 days before her husband's murder. Police believe Michael Thompson was visiting his wife's grave when he was attacked by robbers. However, several strange details have investigators puzzled. Grace stopped reading. Her heart was beating so fast she thought she might faint. They knew something was wrong. The police were still investigating. Grace threw the newspaper in the trash and tried to continue her normal day. But she couldn't stop thinking about the article. That evening, Grace was walking home from work when she noticed a man following her. He was tall and thin, wearing a black suit. Every time Grace looked back, he was there. Grace walked faster. The man walked faster too. Grace turned into a small street near her apartment. The man turned too. Finally, Grace stopped and faced him. "Why are you following me?" she demanded. The man smiled and walked closer. "Hello, Grace. Or should I call you Ruth?" Grace's blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Ruth Johnson." "Really?" the man said. He pulled out a photograph from his jacket and showed it to Grace. It was a picture of Grace and Michael on their wedding day 5 years ago. "My name is Detective James Okafor," the man said. "I've been investigating your husband's murder for 3 months, and I know you're not dead." Grace tried to run, but Detective Okafor grabbed her arm. "We need to talk," he said. Detective Okafor took Grace to a small restaurant where they could speak privately. Grace sat across from him, trying to think of a way to escape. "How did you find me?" Grace asked. "It wasn't easy," Detective Okafor said. "But you made some mistakes. You've been sending money to your sister in Abuja every month. We tracked the money transfers." Grace cursed herself. She had been so careful about everything else, but she hadn't thought about the money. "You also look exactly like your old self, except for the hair and glasses," Detective Okafor continued. "Did you really think a few changes would fool everyone forever? What do you want?" Grace asked. Detective Okafor leaned forward. "I want the truth. What really happened the night your husband died?" Grace stared at him. She had 2 choices. She could lie and hope Detective Okafor couldn't prove anything. Or she could tell him the truth and hope he would understand. "You won't believe me," Grace said finally. "Try me." Grace took a deep breath and told Detective Okafor everything. She told him about Michael's abuse. She told him about her plan to fake her death. She told him about that terrible night in the cemetery when Michael tried to kill her. When she finished, Detective Okafor was quiet for a long time. "So you killed your husband in self-defense," he said finally. "Yes," Grace whispered. "And your friend Jennifer? Did you kill her too?"
No.
Grace said quickly. "Michael killed Jennifer. He told me he made her car crash. She was trying to help me escape." Detective Okafor nodded slowly. "That matches what we found. Jennifer's car accident looked suspicious. We think someone tampered with her brakes." Grace started crying. "Jennifer died because of me. She was trying to help me, and Michael killed her for it." "It's not your fault," Detective Okafor said gently. "Your husband was a dangerous man." Grace looked up at him, surprised. "You believe me? I've been investigating domestic violence cases for 10 years, Detective Okafor said. "I know the signs, and I know that sometimes Killing an abuser is the only way to stop them. Grace felt a spark of hope. So, you're not going to arrest me? Detective Okafor was quiet again. Then he said something that surprised Grace. There's something else you need to know. About your husband. What do you mean? Detective Okafor pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. When we investigated Michael's death, we looked into his background. We found some very disturbing things. He opened the folder and showed Grace several photographs. Do you recognize any of these women? Grace looked at the photos. They showed 4 different women. All young and pretty like Grace had been when she married Michael. No, Grace said. Who are they? They were all married to your husband, Detective Okafor said. Grace stared at him. That's impossible. Michael was only married to me. Not legally, Detective Okafor said. But he lived with these women at different times over the past 15 years. He told each of them that they were his wife. Grace looked at the photos again. What happened to them? Detective Okafor's face was grim. The first one, Sandra, supposedly died in a house fire in 2010. The second one, Mary, drowned in her bathtub in 2013. The third one, Patricia, fell down the stairs in 2016. The fourth one, Elizabeth, died in a car accident in 2019. Grace felt sick. You think Michael killed them all? I'm sure of it, Detective Okafor said. Michael Thompson was a serial killer. He would find young women, convince them to marry him, abuse them for a few years, then kill them and take their money. Grace stared at the photographs of Michael's victims. These women looked so happy in their pictures. They had no idea they were marrying a monster. You were supposed to be victim number 5, Detective Okafor said. But you were smarter than the others. You found a way to escape. But I didn't escape, Grace said. I killed him. And you saved your own life, Detective Okafor said. And probably saved other women's lives too. Michael would have kept killing if you hadn't stopped him. Grace felt a strange mix of emotions. She was horrified to learn about Michael's other victims. But she also felt relieved. For 3 months, she had felt guilty about killing Michael. Now she realized that she had stopped a serial killer. What happens now? Grace asked. Detective Okafor closed the folder. That depends on you. What do you mean? I have 2 options, Detective Okafor said. I can arrest you for Michael's murder and for faking your death. You would go to prison, probably for many years. Grace's heart sank. Or, Detective Okafor continued, I can close Michael's case as an unsolved murder. I can report that we believe he was killed by unknown robbers. Grace looked at him with surprise. You would do that? Michael Thompson was a monster who killed at least 4 innocent women, Detective Okafor said. Justice was served when you killed him, even if it wasn't done through the legal system. But what about me being alive? What about faking my death? Detective Okafor smiled slightly. As far as I'm concerned, Grace Thompson died 3 months ago. Ruth Johnson is a completely different person who just happens to look like her. Grace couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're going to let me go? I'm going to let you live your life, Detective Okafor said. But there are conditions. What conditions? First, you can never go back to Lagos. Grace Thompson is dead, and she needs to stay dead. Grace nodded. She never wanted to see Lagos again anyway. Second, you can never contact anyone from your old life. Not your sister, not your old friends, not your coworkers. Grace Thompson's relationships died with her. This was harder. Grace missed her sister terribly, but she understood why it was necessary. Third, if you ever commit another crime, any crime, I will personally hunt you down and arrest you. This is your one chance at a new life. Don't waste it. I understand, Grace said. Detective Okafor stood up to leave. Then he turned back to Grace. One more thing, he said. Michael had a lot of money hidden in secret bank accounts. Money he stole from his victims. We're going to give that money to the families of the women he killed. Grace nodded. She didn't want any of Michael's blood money anyway. After Detective Okafor left, Grace sat in the restaurant for a long time, thinking about everything he had told her. She thought about Sandra, Mary, Patricia, and Elizabeth, the women who hadn't been able to escape Michael like she had. She wondered what their lives had been like. She wondered if they had tried to leave him like she had. Grace made a decision. She would live her new life not just for herself, but for them too. She would live the life they never got to have. 6 months later, Grace was still working at the hospital in Kaduna. But now she wasn't just a cleaner. She had started a support group for women who were being abused by their husbands and boyfriends. Every week, 10 or 15 women would come to the hospital after hours to talk about their problems and get help. Grace never told them her real story. She just said she was someone who understood what they were going through. She helped women find safe places to stay when they left their abusers. She helped them get jobs so they could support themselves. She taught them that they didn't have to stay with men who hurt them. And sometimes, when the women asked her how she knew so much about domestic violence, Grace would smile and say, "I learned from someone who escaped, someone who proved that no matter how powerful your abuser seems, there's always a way out." One evening, Grace was closing up the support group meeting when a young woman named Peace came up to her. "Sister Ruth," Peace said, "I want to thank you. Before I started coming to these meetings, I thought I was trapped forever. My husband used to beat me every night. He told me he would kill me if I tried to leave." Grace felt her heart ache. Peace's story sounded so much like her own. "What changed?" Grace asked. "You did," Peace said. "You taught me that I'm stronger than I think. You taught me that I deserve better. Last week, I finally left him." Peace smiled, and Grace saw something in her eyes that she recognized. "Hope, where will you go now?" Grace asked. "I'm moving to Abuja to live with my cousin," Peace said. "I'm going to start a new life, just like you taught me." As Grace watched Peace walk away, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time.
Pride.
Grace Thompson had died in that cemetery 3 months ago, but Ruth Johnson was helping other women find the courage to save themselves. And maybe Grace thought that was enough. Maybe that was how she could find peace with what she had done. That night, Grace stood outside the hospital and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in Lagos, there was a grave with her name on it. Somewhere in that same city, Michael's body was buried in a different cemetery. But Grace wasn't thinking about Lagos anymore. She wasn't thinking about the past. She was thinking about tomorrow, about the women she would help, about the lives she might save. Grace had paid a terrible price for her freedom. She had lost her old identity, her family, her friends. She had blood on her hands that would never wash off. But she was alive, and she was free. And for the first time since that horrible night in the cemetery, Grace Thompson, now Ruth Johnson, smiled and meant it. The woman who had pretended to be dead to escape her husband had finally learned how to live again.